The stars were dying around them, and Admiral Kim Jisoo knew humanity was about to follow. She stood on the bridge of Fortress Alpha, the last human stronghold in the galaxy, watching the enemy ships fill the darkness like a swarm of angry insects. There were so many alien vessels that they blocked out entire star systems behind them. "How many ships do they have now?" Jisoo asked her second-in-command, Captain Lee Do-yun. "Our computers stopped counting at 50 million, Admiral. The scanners can't handle the numbers anymore." Jisoo nodded quietly. She had expected this answer, but hearing it still made her stomach feel heavy. 50 million enemy ships against their single fortress. The math was simple and cruel. The void hierarchy had been conquering the galaxy for over 1,000 years. They were not like the aliens in old Earth movies who wanted to steal resources or enslave people. The hierarchy was much worse. They captured entire species and forced them to join their collective mind, erasing everything that made each race unique. Every planet they conquered made them stronger and smarter. 3 months ago, they had given humanity their final choice: surrender and become part of their collective, or fight and be destroyed completely. Most of the galaxy expected humans to surrender like every other species had done. After all, humanity was not the strongest or smartest race. Their weapons were decent, but not amazing. Their ships were tough, but not unbeatable. But humans had surprised everyone, including themselves. They chose to fight. "Admiral, the last evacuation ship just jumped to hyperspace," reported Lieutenant Park Soo-young from her station. "All civilian populations have been moved to the hidden colonies." "Good," Jisoo said, though her voice sounded tired. "At least some of us will survive to remember what we were." The evacuation had taken 3 years. 3 long years of humanity, running from system to system, always staying one step ahead of the hierarchy's massive fleets. They had lost Earth in the first year. Mars fell 6 months later. One by one, every human world had been abandoned or destroyed. Until only this fortress remained. Fortress Alpha was built inside an old asteroid, orbiting a red giant star that was slowly burning itself out. The fortress was huge, big enough to hold 1 million people, but now it housed only 10,000. The rest were soldiers, engineers, and scientists who had volunteered to stay behind for one final mission. Deep inside the fortress, past layers of heavy armor and security doors, Dr. Park Min-ho was working on something that most people would call impossible. His laboratory was filled with machines that hummed and sparked with strange energy. Wires and cables ran everywhere like the veins of some giant mechanical heart. "How much more time do you need?" asked Commander Yoon Ji-hoo, who was in charge of the fortress defenses. Dr. Park wiped sweat from his forehead. His hands were shaking, but not from fear. He had been working for 70 hours straight. Maybe 2 hours, maybe 3. "The calculations are so complex that our computers keep overheating. We might not have 2 hours, Ji-hoo said, pointing at a screen that showed the enemy fleet moving closer. "They'll be in weapons range soon." "Then we fight until I'm ready," Park said simply. "This is our only chance." The project had no official name, but everyone called it the Prometheus device. It was based on theories that most scientists said were crazy. The idea was to take something that made humans different from every other species, their stubborn refusal to give up, and turn it into a weapon. Other races were smart enough to surrender when they were beaten. They understood math and logic. When facing impossible odds, they made the reasonable choice to save their lives by joining the hierarchy. But humans were different. Throughout their history, humans had won battles they should have lost. They fought harder when cornered. They became more dangerous when defeat seemed certain. They had a saying, "It's not over until it's over." Dr. Park believed this human trait was not just mental, it was something that could be measured and used. His device would take the combined will of every human in the galaxy and focus it into something the universe had never seen before. The fortress shook as enemy weapons began, hitting their shields. Red warning lights flashed throughout the corridors. Soldiers ran to their battle stations knowing they were about to face impossible odds. "All ships, this is Admiral Kim Jisoo," she announced over the communication system. "Today we make our Final stand. We are not fighting just for ourselves, but for every species that ever dared to be different. We are fighting for the right to remain human. Outside the fortress, the Void Hierarchy's black ships moved into attack formation. They had done this same dance with 1,000 other species. They expected the humans to fight bravely for a few hours, then surrender when they realized how hopeless their situation was. But deep in the fortress, Dr. Park was putting the final touches on a device that would prove something important. Sometimes the impossible becomes possible when someone refuses to believe it cannot be done. The last battle for humanity was about to begin, and neither side knew that everything was about to change forever. Overlord Vextar floated in his command chamber, surrounded by screens showing data from across the galaxy. His body was a mixture of flesh and metal, parts taken from dozens of conquered species. When the hierarchy absorbed a new race, their leaders took the best traits for themselves. Vextar had the sharp mind of the Corvani, the quick reflexes of the Jartek, and the cold logic of the Vorthan. He studied the numbers on his screens with satisfaction. The human fortress was completely surrounded. His fleet had 50 million ships, each one carrying weapons that could destroy planets. The humans had one small fortress with maybe 10,000 defenders. The math was so simple that even a child could understand it. Report on human military strength. Vextar commanded his aide, a creature that had once been part of a proud warrior race before joining the collective. Their weapons are standard plasma cannons and missile systems. Their shields are holding, for now, but they will fail within 6 hours. Their ship designs are basic, nothing we have not seen before. By all calculations, they should have surrendered already. Vextar made a sound that might have been laughter, though it came out as a mechanical buzz. Every species thinks they are special. Every species believes they can win against impossible odds. But mathematics does not lie. Physics does not care about hope or courage. The hierarchy had been conquering the galaxy for over 1,000 years, using the same perfect method. First, they would surround their target with overwhelming force. Then they would offer a choice. Join the collective, willingly or be destroyed and absorbed anyway. Most species chose to surrender once they saw how hopeless their situation was. The smart ones gave up quickly. The stubborn ones fought for a while, but always reached the same conclusion. The hierarchy always won because they had the combined knowledge and power of every species they had ever conquered. Tell me about human psychology again, Vextar said, reviewing files on his screen. Humans are unusual in several ways. They form strong emotional bonds with each other. They often make decisions based on feelings rather than logic. Most importantly, they have a tendency to fight harder when they are losing badly. Explain. This tendency. Our psychological experts believe it is a survival trait from their early evolution. When humans were primitive creatures, those who kept fighting even when wounded or outnumbered were more likely to survive and have children. This trait became part of their species. Vextar found this information interesting, but not concerning. Every species had its own psychology, its own ways of thinking. The hierarchy had learned to work with all of them. In the end, logic always won over emotion. How many species have we absorbed in the last 1,000 years? He asked. Exactly 1,047, Overlord. Each one made us stronger and smarter. And how many of those species refused our offer of peaceful integration? 612 species chose to fight. All were eventually absorbed. Vextar looked at the tactical display showing the human fortress. The little building looked so small compared to his massive fleet. The humans had fought bravely for 3 years, longer than most species managed. They had been creative with their tactics, using tricks and strategies that had surprised his commanders several times. But creativity only went so far. In the end, numbers mattered more than cleverness. There is something different about these humans, reported Commander Zell Noth, one of Vextar's fleet leaders. Our psychological warfare units have been broadcasting images of their destroyed homeworld, showing them how hopeless their situation is. Usually this breaks enemy morale quickly. And the humans are not responding as expected. Instead of becoming depressed or afraid, they seem to be getting more determined. Some of our monitoring equipment has detected them actually becoming more organized and focused. Vextar studied this report with mild interest. Some species react to stress by becoming more unified. The Corvani did something similar before we absorbed them. It makes no difference to the final outcome. What Vextar did not mention was that the humans had puzzled him more than any other species. Their technology was not impressive. Their individual soldiers were not particularly strong or fast. Their ships were well built, but nothing special. By every measurement the hierarchy used, humans should have been conquered easily. Yet they had lasted 3 years. They had destroyed hundreds of hierarchy ships using tactics that made no sense according to military doctrine. They had evacuated their entire species while fighting a running battle across half the galaxy. They had done all of this while being outnumbered by millions to one. "Overlord, we are detecting unusual energy readings from the human fortress," reported the sensor officer. "What kind of energy?" "Unknown. Our computers cannot identify the signature. It does not match any known weapon or shield technology." Vextar considered this information. Every species had some kind of secret weapon they tried to use at the end. The Jatek had built planet-killing bombs. The Vorthan had created artificial black holes. The Corvani had tried to upload their consciousness into their computers. All of these final weapons had failed. The hierarchy had seen everything the galaxy could throw at them. "Continue the attack," Vextar ordered. "Whatever they are planning, it will not matter. We have conquered over 1,000 species. We know how this story ends." But deep inside, his mechanical mind, a small part that was still organic, felt something he had not experienced in centuries. It was just a tiny feeling, barely noticeable. It was doubt. The Prometheus device did not explode like a bomb or flash like lightning. Instead, it made a sound so quiet that only Dr. Park Min-ho could hear it at first, a gentle humming that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. He stood in his laboratory, watching numbers scroll across his screens, and suddenly realized that something impossible was happening. The device was working. Admiral Kim Jisoo felt it first as a tiny warmth in her chest, like drinking hot tea on a cold morning. She was standing on the bridge watching enemy ships prepare for their final attack when the feeling began to grow. It was not painful or frightening. It felt like coming home after a long journey. "Admiral?" called Lieutenant Park Soo-young from her station. "I'm getting strange readings from all over the fortress. It's like everyone's heartbeat is starting to match up." Jisoo touched her chest and realized her lieutenant was right. Her heart was beating in perfect rhythm with the humming sound from deep inside the fortress. But it was more than that. Somehow she could feel the heartbeats of everyone around her. Captain Lee Do-hyun at his weapons station, Commander Yoon Ji-hoo down in the defense center, even Dr. Park in his laboratory far below. The feeling spread beyond the fortress like ripples in a pond. Light years away, on a hidden colony world called New Haven, a little girl named Kim Sina was helping her mother plant vegetables in their garden. Suddenly she stopped digging and looked up at the sky. "Mama, do you feel that?" she asked. Her mother, Lee Hee-jin, had been trying to forget about the war and focus on building a new life for her daughter. But now she felt something stirring in her heart, a connection to every human in the galaxy, including the brave soldiers fighting at Fortress Alpha. "I feel it too, sweetheart," she whispered, and tears began rolling down her cheeks. But they were not sad tears. For the first time in 3 years, she felt hope. On a refugee transport ship drifting through empty space, Captain Choi Woo-bin was trying to keep his passengers calm when the change hit his crew. His ship was old and damaged, barely holding together, after running from the hierarchy for months. The people on board were tired and scared, wondering if they would ever find a safe place to live. But suddenly the ship's engines began running smoother. The lights burned brighter. The hull, which had been cracked and patched many times, somehow felt stronger. Woo-bin stared at his control panels in amazement as systems that had been failing for weeks suddenly started working perfectly. "Captain," called his engineer Park Jin-young, "you need to see this. Our ship. It's like it's fixing itself." Back at Fortress Alpha, Admiral Jisoo was experiencing something that no human had ever felt before. She was still herself. She could still think her own thoughts and make her own decisions. But she was also connected to every other human in the galaxy, in a way that went deeper than radio signals or computer networks. She could feel the determination of the soldiers around her. She could sense the love of parents on distant worlds who were holding their children close. She could touch the memories of humans who had lived and died throughout history, explorers who had sailed unknown oceans, scientists who had reached for the stars, ordinary people who had done extraordinary things when the world seemed hopeless. Dr. Park stumbled out of his laboratory, his face pale with amazement. "Admiral, the device, it's not just connecting us to each other. It's connecting us to something deeper. Every human who ever lived, every human who ever refused to give up, every moment in our history when someone chose to fight against impossible odds." The fortress shook as hierarchy weapons hit their shields, but somehow the impacts felt less threatening now. Jisoo looked at her tactical display and saw something that should have been impossible. Their shields were not just holding, they were getting stronger. "How is this happening?" asked Captain Lee Do-hyun. "I think," Jisoo said slowly, "we're not just 10,000 people anymore. We're connected to every human in the galaxy, and they're all lending us their strength." On worlds scattered across the galaxy, humans who had been hiding in fear suddenly stood up straighter. Children who had never seen Earth began having dreams of blue skies and green forests. Old people remembered stories their grandparents had told them about humans who had faced impossible challenges and won through sheer stubbornness. The connection was not like the hierarchy's collective mind, which erased individual thoughts and feelings. This was different. Every human remained themselves, but they were also part of something larger, a shared spirit that had been growing stronger for thousands of years every time a human had refused to quit when things looked hopeless. Engineer Kang Tae-hyun, working in the fortress's power core, watched in amazement as his equipment began operating beyond its designed limits. The power output is increasing, but the systems aren't overloading. It's like the machines know what we need them to do. Outside the fortress, Overlord Vexitar's sensors detected massive energy signatures coming from human settlements all across the galaxy, but the readings made no sense. Humans were not building new weapons or ships. Instead, they seemed to be changing into something his computers could not identify or understand. The flame that Dr. Park had ignited was not made of fire or energy. It was made of something the hierarchy had never encountered in 1,000 years. Of conquest, the unbreakable human spirit that grows stronger every time it should logically surrender. Overlord Vextar stared at his screens in disbelief. The reports flooding in from across the galaxy made no sense according to everything the hierarchy knew about warfare and physics. Human settlements that should have been hiding in fear were suddenly fighting back with impossible success. "Report from Sector 7, announced his communications officer. "The human colony on Kepler 442b has destroyed our entire occupation force." "How many ships did we have there?" Vextar asked, though his mechanical voice sounded less confident than before. 12,000 warships, Overlord. The human colony had maybe 3,000 people, mostly farmers and their families. Vextar's enhanced mind processed this information and rejected it as impossible. Farmers could not defeat trained warriors with advanced weapons, yet the reports kept coming. Sector 12 reports similar losses. A human refugee convoy has somehow destroyed a battle group of 50,000 ships. The convoy consisted of old transport vessels with no military equipment. "Show me the battle recordings," Vextar ordered. The main screen lit up with footage from the battle. Vextar watched as human ships that looked ready to fall apart somehow moved with perfect coordination. Their weapons, which should have been weak and outdated, cut through hierarchy shields like they were made of paper. Most disturbing of all, the human ships seemed to get stronger as they took damage, their hulls somehow repairing themselves during combat. On the colony world of New Seoul, Commander Choi Woo-bin led a defense that should have lasted only minutes against overwhelming odds. His people were farmers, teachers, and shopkeepers who had never fought in a real battle. They had hunting rifles and farming tools against an invasion force equipped with plasma cannons and battle armor. But something had changed when the flame reached their world. Woo-bin found that he could sense exactly where every enemy soldier was, even through walls and around corners. His people moved together like they had trained for years, covering each other perfectly without needing to speak. Their simple weapons somehow punched through advanced armor, while enemy shots seemed to miss more often than they should. "How are we doing this?" asked his second-in-command, Dr. Yoon Soman, as she watched a group of teenagers use farming equipment to disable a hierarchy tank. "I don't know," Wu Bin replied, "but I can feel everyone fighting across the galaxy. It's like we're all part of the same battle, even though we're light years apart." The hierarchy's greatest strength had always been their ability to learn from each species they conquered. They would study their enemies, figure out their weaknesses, and then absorb their useful traits. But the humans were doing something that broke all their rules. Vextar accessed the hierarchy's vast database, searching through records of over 1,000 conquered species. He looked for any race that had shown similar abilities, the power to coordinate without communication, to strengthen their equipment through willpower, to fight better as a group than as individuals. He found nothing. The Corvani had been fierce warriors, but they fought as individuals. The Jutek had been clever strategists, but their plans took time to coordinate. The Vorthan had been logical and precise, but they followed predictable patterns. Every species the hierarchy had ever faced could be understood, studied, and eventually defeated. But humans connected by the flame were something new. They kept their individual personalities and thoughts, yet somehow acted with perfect unity. They used weapons and ships that should not work, powered by something the hierarchy's science could not measure or copy. "Overlord," reported Commander Zelnoth from the front lines at Fortress Alpha. "Our attack on the human fortress is not proceeding as planned. Their shields are not weakening, in fact, they appear to be getting stronger." "Impossible. Deploy more ships." "We have deployed everything, Overlord. All 50 million vessels are engaged. The humans they are fighting back. Their weapons are somehow penetrating our shields." Vextar felt something he had not experienced in centuries of conquest: confusion. His enhanced mind, which combined the intelligence of dozens of species, could not understand what was happening. Every calculation said the humans should have been destroyed hours ago. On distant worlds, human refugees were transforming their hideouts into fortresses. Engineer Kang Tae-hyun, working on a mining station that had been converted into a shelter, watched in amazement as their basic equipment suddenly became incredibly efficient. Mining lasers that had been used for cutting rock were now somehow capable of destroying hierarchy warships. "The machines are responding to us differently," he reported to the other survivors. "It's like they understand what we need them to do, even before we know it ourselves." Lieutenant Ominji, a scientist who had been studying the strange energy readings, made a discovery that would have terrified the hierarchy if they had known about it. "The flame isn't just connecting us to each other," she told her research team. "It's connecting us to every human who ever lived. We're drawing strength from every moment in history when humans refused to give up." Back in his command chamber, Vextar finally understood the terrible truth. The hierarchy had always succeeded because they fought against individuals, single planets, separate fleets, isolated leaders who could be overwhelmed or convinced to surrender. But humans connected by the flame were not individuals anymore. They were something unprecedented, a species that maintained their unique characteristics while sharing a collective strength that grew more powerful through adversity. For the first time in over 1,000 years of conquest, Overlord Vextar began to consider a possibility that his mechanical mind had never computed before. The hierarchy might lose. The war ended not with explosions or surrender, but with something the galaxy had never witnessed before: retreat. For the first time in over 1,000 years, the mighty Void hierarchy turned away from a battle they could not win. Admiral Kim Ji-soo stood on the observation deck of New Terra Station, watching the last hierarchy ships disappear into the darkness beyond the galactic rim. The alien vessels that had once filled space like a swarm of locusts were now fleeing at maximum speed, carrying with them the knowledge that they had met something they could not conquer or understand. "Are they really gone?" asked Captain Lee Do-hyun, joining her at the viewing port. "For now," Jisoo replied. "Our long-range sensors show them jumping to hyperspace, heading for the nearest galaxy. They won't be back anytime soon." The flame that Dr. Park Minho had ignited still burned in every human heart across the galaxy. It had changed them, but not in the way the hierarchy changed the species they absorbed. Humans were still human. They still argued, laughed, cried, and dreamed as individuals. But now they were connected by something deeper than radio waves or computer networks. Jisoo could feel it even now, the presence of millions of other humans scattered across hundreds of worlds. She could sense the joy of families reuniting on colony planets, the determination of engineers rebuilding destroyed cities, and the quiet satisfaction of farmers planting crops on worlds that had been battlefields just days before. On the mining world of Kepler Station, engineer Kang Tae-hyun was helping to convert military equipment back to peaceful uses. The mining lasers that had destroyed hierarchy warships were now cutting tunnels for underground cities. The transport ships that had fought impossible battles were carrying supplies to rebuild damaged settlements. "It's strange," he told his work crew. "I can still feel all of you and everyone else too, but it doesn't feel crowded in my head. It feels like being part of a family that stretches across the whole galaxy." Dr. Yoon Sumin, now working on New Seoul to help other refugee scientists, had been studying the flame since the war ended. Her research showed something remarkable. The connection between humans was not fading over time. If anything, it was growing stronger as more children were born and more people learned to use their new abilities. "We're evolving," she explained to a group of other researchers. "Not physically, but as a species. We're becoming something that can work together while staying individuals. The hierarchy couldn't understand it because they've never seen anything like it before. The changes were everywhere. Human ships could now travel faster and farther than ever before, as if the machines themselves understood what their crews needed. Weapons that should have been weak somehow became incredibly powerful when defending human worlds. Most importantly, humans scattered across the galaxy could coordinate their efforts without any communication delays. Commander Choi Woo-bin, now governor of New Seoul, was part of a council that included leaders from hundreds of human settlements. They met not in person, but through the flame connection, sharing thoughts and ideas instantly across vast distances. "We need to decide what to do next," Woo-bin said during one of these mental meetings. "The hierarchy is gone, but there are other dangers in the galaxy, and there are species that might need our help. We should be careful," warned Admiral Jisoo from her position at New Terra. "We don't want to become conquerors like the hierarchy was." "We won't," replied Dr. Park, who had survived the final battle and was now working to understand what his device had really done. "The flame doesn't make us want to control others. It makes us want to protect what's precious and help those who need it." Lieutenant Ominji had discovered something else important about the flame. "It's not just connecting us to each other," she reported. "It's connecting us to every human who ever refused to give up, every explorer who sailed into unknown waters, every scientist who tried impossible experiments, every ordinary person who stood up when everyone else sat down." This connection to human history was giving them abilities that seemed like magic, but were actually something much more powerful. The combined will of an entire species that had always grown stronger when facing impossible odds. On Earth, which was slowly being rebuilt after the hierarchy's destruction, children who had been born after the flame was lit were showing remarkable abilities. They could sense each other's emotions across great distances. They learned faster when working together. Most importantly, they never seemed to lose hope even when facing difficult problems. Young Kim Sana, now 8 years old, was planting flowers in the ruins of what had once been Seoul. Her mother, Lee Hyejin, watched as the little girl somehow knew exactly where to plant each seed for the best growth. "How do you know where to put them?" Hyejin asked. "The flowers tell me," Sana replied simply. "Everything is connected now, Mama. The flowers, the soil, us, even the stars. We just have to listen." Across the galaxy, humanity was spreading once again among the stars. But they were different now from the species that had first left Earth centuries ago. They carried with them an unbreakable flame, the light of a people who had proven that defeat is only certain until someone refuses to accept it. The hierarchy had fled to distant galaxies, but they carried with them something that would haunt them forever, the memory of a species that grew stronger through unity while remaining beautifully, chaotically, unstoppably human. The flame burned on, lighting the way to a future where hope would never die.